Here's a question that keeps surfacing in military discussions, policy institutions, government corridors, and honestly, even in casual conversations happening across the globe right now. Can the United States genuinely succeed in a modern conflict using the same approach it has depended on for the past 3 decades? That approach actually has a specific name. It's called shock and awe. And if you followed any reporting on American military engagements over the last several decades, you've encountered that term before. But do you truly understand what it means? Do you know where it originally came from? And more critically, do you understand why knowledgeable people are beginning to seriously question whether it remains effective? Let's go back to the beginning, because this story has roots that stretch further than most people appreciate. Following World War II, the globe was effectively divided between two colossal superpowers. The United States on one side, the Soviet Union on the other. Both nations possessed nuclear arsenals. Both maintained enormous standing armies. Both held the capacity to completely obliterate the other. And that created one of the strangest geopolitical conditions in all of recorded history. Two of the most formidable nations ever to exist on Earth. And yet neither could engage the other in direct combat, because if they did, both would be finished. Nuclear warheads would launch, cities would be reduced to rubble, millions of lives would be extinguished within hours. And so a bizarre equilibrium emerged, both sides armed beyond imagination, yet neither able to actually fire the first shot. That condition became known as mutually assured destruction, a phrase that sounds almost grimly absurd when spoken aloud. Mutually assured destruction, meaning if you strike, I strike back, and we both cease to exist. That was the underlying logic that kept the Cold War from becoming a hot one, and it pushed American military thinkers in a completely new direction. Rather than preparing for a head-on collision with Soviet forces, the United States began concentrating on something else entirely. They shifted focus toward projecting power, toward demonstrating such an overwhelming technological and military superiority that any potential adversary would consider resistance genuinely futile. From that intellectual foundation, the doctrine of shock and awe was born. The core concept is almost elegant in how straightforward it sounds. You don't wear down an enemy gradually. You don't commit to years of slow attrition. Instead, you strike with such ferocity and speed in the opening moments of a conflict that the entire enemy system implodes. You eliminate command centers, you sever communication networks, you neutralize leadership, and once the leadership is gone, the rest of the structure has no idea what to do next. Soldiers panic, military coordination breaks down, the government disintegrates, and the war concludes almost before most civilians have even processed that it began. For a period, this model appeared to deliver precisely what it promised. Consider the Gulf War in 1991, consider the Iraq invasion in 2003. In both cases, American-led forces unleashed enormous air campaigns. Cruise missiles cut through darkened skies and struck government infrastructure with stunning accuracy. Radar systems were neutralized. Communication grids went silent. Within a matter of days, the opposing governments had effectively ceased to function. Television audiences watched it unfold in real time and drew the conclusion that this was warfare's future, that modern conflicts could be concluded quickly, decisively, and with comparatively minimal casualties, at least from the American perspective, provided the enemy was struck with sufficient technological force fast enough. But this is precisely where the story becomes complicated. And this is the part of the conversation that defense planners are genuinely grappling with in the present day. The world has shifted. The world. The adversaries that America and other major powers now face are not structured the way Iraq was structured in 1991 or 2003. And because of that fundamental difference, the core assumptions embedded in shock and awe may no longer hold. Here is what that means in practical terms. Shock and awe is built on a particular assumption. It assumes that military and political authority is concentrated in one place. It assumes there is a recognizable capital, a central command structure, a military headquarters, an identifiable leadership hierarchy that can be located, targeted, and destroyed. Take out the center and the entire system falls apart. That logic holds perfectly well when your adversary is constructed like a conventional nation-state, a pyramid of authority flowing downward from a clear apex. But what happens when your adversary is not structured that way at all? What happens when individual military units operate with their own independent objectives, their own supply pipelines, their own communication infrastructure? What happens when even the removal of top leadership doesn't disrupt the mission because the people on the ground already know exactly what they're doing and continue doing it regardless? Suddenly, leveling the capital city does not conclude the war. It simply relocates the battlefield. The conflict becomes more fragmented, more dispersed, and in many respects far more difficult to manage. This is the essence of decentralized command, and it has become a defining characteristic of how many contemporary military organizations are built. They are specifically engineered to absorb the kind of assault that shock and awe is designed to deliver. You can remove the head and the body continues functioning. Now add to that the concept of asymmetrical warfare, and the situation grows considerably more intricate. Asymmetrical warfare describes a conflict in which the two opposing sides are not fighting by the same rules or with the same tools. One side may possess aircraft carriers, stealth aircraft, satellite surveillance networks, and precision-guided munitions carrying multi-million-dollar price tags. The other side may possess none of those things. But rather than attempting to match that firepower directly, which would be futile, the less powerful side chooses to fight on entirely different terms. Let me offer a concrete illustration because this is no longer hypothetical. This is unfolding in the present. Picture one party in a conflict deploying small drones, simple, relatively affordable, mass-manufactured, unmanned aerial vehicles. Some of these units carry a price tag around $40,000 to $50,000 apiece. These drones can travel hundreds of miles, they can carry explosive payloads, they can strike power generation facilities, petroleum infrastructure, military installations, and port operations. They can be manufactured in large quantities with relative ease. They can be transported and concealed without difficulty. They can be launched from the bed of a pickup truck or from the rooftop of a nondescript building. Now consider how the technologically superior party defends against such a threat. They maintain advanced missile defense platforms, sophisticated radar arrays that track inbound objects and fire interceptor missiles to destroy threats before impact. These are genuinely extraordinary technological achievements. But here is the fundamental problem. Each interceptor missile might carry a cost of $1 million or more. And sometimes a single interceptor is not sufficient. Two or three may be required to reliably neutralize a single drone. Run the arithmetic. A $50,000 drone is destroyed by $2 million worth of interceptors. If the opposing side launches 100 drones in a single evening, the defending force burns through $200 million in defense expenditure within hours to defeat weapons that cost $5 million total to produce. That is the economic logic at the heart of asymmetrical warfare. The weaker party forces the stronger one to spend its way toward exhaustion, and the stronger side, for all its technological sophistication, can find itself locked in a situation where winning every individual engagement becomes financially ruinous over time. And this challenge is only going to intensify as technology continues to advance. Historically, developing serious military hardware demanded enormous industrial infrastructure, massive factories, complex supply chains, highly specialized technical labor. Only the largest and wealthiest nations could manufacture advanced weapon systems. That reality is changing. Drones can be assembled in modest production facilities. Electronic components are freely available on global commercial markets. Software can be developed by compact engineering teams working in unremarkable office spaces. The industrial barriers to entry for certain categories of military capability are falling. What this means, in concrete terms, is that the near monopoly on advanced firepower that major powers like the United States have long relied upon is gradually eroding. Not collapsing entirely, but eroding. And when that advantage diminishes even marginally, the foundational assumptions of doctrines like shock and awe begin to look increasingly brittle. There is yet another dimension to this that tends to be underestimated, and that is the force of ideology and conviction. Some armies fight because they receive compensation for it. Some soldiers serve because it constitutes a career. But in certain conflicts, people fight because they are convinced they are protecting something that carries more weight than their own lives: their faith, their land, their identity, their community, their people. When a conflict carries that depth of meaning for those engaged in it, the mathematics of conventional military strategy begin to unravel. Destroying a command structure does not end a war when every individual combatant views themselves as their own commanding officer. Bombing infrastructure does not produce surrender when those enduring the suffering interpret it as evidence that they stand on the righteous side of a sacred struggle. In these circumstances, shock and awe does not just fail to work, it can actively backfire. It can harden determination. It can generate martyrs. It can cause the conflict to deepen rather than resolve. Pull all of these threads together and you begin to grasp why serious analysts are genuinely alarmed about what a major conflict might look like today. Not a confrontation with a small, disorganized opponent, but a sustained engagement against adversaries who have invested significant thought into how to counter American military doctrine specifically. What happens if shock and awe is deployed and simply does not produce the expected systemic collapse? What is the fallback because the doctrine was never architected with a contingency plan? It was constructed entirely on the premise that overwhelming force applied in the opening hours would be definitively decisive. If that premise proves incorrect, a conflict designed to conclude within days could extend into years, and the economic consequences of that kind of prolonged engagement would not remain confined to the theater of operations. We inhabit a deeply interwoven global economy, energy markets, financial systems, manufacturing supply chains, all of it connected in ways that make large-scale disruption extraordinarily hazardous. Oil prices surge, shipping lanes get blocked, financial markets enter freefall, a regional military conflict metastasizes into a global economic emergency with remarkable speed. This is precisely why military doctrine carries significance for people who have no particular interest in military affairs, because doctrine shapes how political leaders reason about whether and when to deploy force. It shapes the assumptions they carry into crisis situations, and if those assumptions rest on a model of warfare that no longer reflects current reality, leaders may make decisions that produce consequences nobody planned for and nobody desired. The doctrines that govern military thinking today were largely constructed in a world that no longer exists. They were products of Cold War logic, refined through Cold War assumptions, tested against conflicts that may not be representative of what future confrontations will look like. Whether they have evolved rapidly enough to account for the new realities of drone warfare, decentralized command structures, asymmetrical tactics, and ideologically driven combatants, is a question that no military establishment anywhere in the world can answer with genuine confidence. So the next time you encounter news coverage or political commentary about the possibility of major conflict in the Middle East or across Asia, recognize that beneath all of that surface-level reporting, a deeper and far more unsettling question is being quietly asked, not simply whether a war might occur, but whether the strategies that powerful nations believe will deliver victory will actually function as intended when tested against real adversaries in real conditions. Because if shock and awe is ultimately a Cold War relic dressed in the language of modern strategy, then the next significant conflict may expose that truth in the most catastrophic and costly way possible.